The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everybody, welcome to Eagle Point Funding's webinar, Federal Funding for Unmanned R&D Projects. We're going to talk about a number of issues related to federal funding for autonomous drones, autonomous vehicles, and other related robotics topics when it comes to receiving federal grants in order to fully fund your R&D projects. My name is Josh Baron. I'm joined today by Uriel Bar-Oz. We're both members of Eagle Point Funding's team. Uriel is going to be touching upon a more detailed look at examples of federal grants and also in areas and specific topics of interest. I'm going to take us through an overview of how the grant process works, and I'm also going to be touching upon a number of more particular interest when it comes to federal grants for unmanned R&D projects. So without further ado, one of the most common questions I receive is how much money is really in federal grants? How big is the federal budget for R&D? Let's say in 2018. Well, a couple months ago, that changed drastically. The number prior to March 23rd was $151 billion to be spent in 2018 alone. And suddenly, when the omnibus budget passed, we were surprised to find out that the budget had swollen to $176.8 billion. Now, not all of that is based on is only for private industry. Roughly $60 to $70 billion does make it to the private industry. The rest goes to universities or public institutions, as well as intramural R&D projects themselves. So we know that there's quite a lot of money in. Let's take a look at the different R&D grant mechanisms. Most of you have probably heard of SBIR, or Small Business Innovation Research. A lot of people are convinced that either SBIR or STTR are the only grant mechanisms that exist. But realistically, when you look at the numbers, they're a small fraction of the federal budget. The most common grant mechanism is broad agency announcements, which differ from SBIR in a number of ways. Uriel might talk about that a little bit later on. But it's important to understand that most of the grants available are not small business innovation research. But still with that, SBIR is an incredible grant mechanism. However, there's a world of grants well beyond SBIR. The categories, if we look at unmanned technology as it relates to federal grants, is first of all by air, land, or sea vehicles. And also there's a whole subworld of robotics which doesn't necessarily fit into one of those classifications. Air we know is UAVs or UASs or drones, however you want to call it. But also there's a number of autonomous or unmanned vehicles that are on the land or sea. We also know that the applications themselves can be, for civilian or for commercial use or for defense. If we look at one department, Department of Defense, for instance, we know, and this is thanks to the Drone Center out of Bard University, that the budget from the DoD for drones alone, and we're talking about one type of unmanned vehicle, and we're talking about one department or one agency itself, that number is $3.56 billion. That means that, and this number is, by the way, for procurement as well as R&D, but a healthy amount of this budget, it definitely is going to R&D, where we see that the interest here is split up not just from the Army, but we see the Navy has a very vetted interest. DARPA, I don't know if many of you heard of DARPA, but DARPA was founded around the time of the launch of Sputnik under the Kennedy administration, with the idea of DARPA is to maintain superiority, technological superiority of the U.S., and they are investing in a very wide range of technologies. You have the Air Force, and you also have the Army. So let's take a look at how federal grants differ from other more common and well-known funding routes that companies go, or academic institutions for that matter. Dilutive funding, which is what most of us know, venture capital or any sort of outside investment, usually involves or always involves a transfer of equity. And that usually this will come with advisors, additional board members, and there's also a question of whether or not the IP is maintained in the hands of the researchers themselves. Non-dilutive funding, however, which federal grants or when you do a friends and family fundraising effort are the only similar category, which is involving no equity transfer, and that's why grants are called non-dilutive funding, because there's nothing that you're giving up in return for receiving the grants. You're also not receiving any outside interference, no additional board members or people who are instructing you how to do your research, and all IP rights are maintained. In fact, some grants themselves will allow for a budget in order for you to go and get a patent in order to protect your intellectual property rights. So what is the interest of the federal government? The federal government has a healthy mix between altruistic and economic reasons to invest in your research. And that's first and foremost to advance knowledge and technology as a whole. And yes, that means also investing in companies or academic institutions which are not US based. So you want to advance knowledge and technology as a whole. You also want to build the American economy by creating this technology and improve the quality of life for U.S. citizens. But there's also an ROI, which the federal government sees, which is very healthy, of $2.30 for every federal dollar that the government invests. And this is because by creating new technology, first and foremost, they're creating new business, and new business means new jobs. But also, this new technology is often translated into products, and products lead to new sales, and sales lead to taxes for Uncle Sam. So as we see, there's a mixture of really healthy altruistic and economic vetted interests. So we know that the government is going to continue supporting R&D, and we see that is a very, very vast and varied types of technology which are being supported by the federal government to date. There's another additional value when it comes to federal grants, and that's because in order to receive a federal grant, you're going to undergo a number of checks and balances by different advisors within the federal grant. So we are going to check to see whether or not your technology is worthwhile of their investment. That means that if the federal government invests in you, then you've now received the hallmark of quality or a stamp of approval. And that's why it's not surprising that the Milken Institute found a number of years ago that for every federal dollar invested in R&D, those companies net $8.38 in private sector investments over the next 8 years. That means that the grant has the potential to not only lead to a product which will create revenue for the company, but it also can lead to eightfold the amount you receive for the grant in private investments. So why doesn't everybody apply? I think that there are probably two primary challenges which prevent companies from approaching federal grants. And the first is it's difficult to identify opportunities. Now, there are a number of federal grant forums and portals which can be checked, but you're usually limited to looking at a very narrow scale of opportunities. The other, and that is unless you're doing it in a very systematic way and going after multiple and a wide lens of potential opportunities. The second is per submission rates are relatively low when you go at it alone, and early rejection often leads companies to despair. So in order to find success in the federal system, our staff has found 4 key points which can really help you hone in and maximize your chance of receiving federal grants. The first is know the federal system. there's tremendous amount of literature about the different organizations, different agencies, what they're interested in, what they're looking for. And also there's a way, and you're encouraged to do so, to contact the different program officers to find out how relevant your technology could before you invest a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into actually applying for the grant. The second is you need to really have a good understanding of what your roadmap looks like for your technology over the next couple of years. Once you can hone in on what it is that you would like to accomplish as a company or as an academic institution, then you can widen your search for grants to fit that technological roadmap, as opposed to kind of going to the ocean with a fishing pole and trying to hope that you're in the right spot. The third is you need to identify multiple relevant opportunities. And the fourth, which I'll already skip to, is you need to take these multiple opportunities and you need to turn them into a multi-submission strategy. And the logic here is just clear. The more grants you apply to, by simple set statistics, you increase your chance of receiving a high-level federal grant. When this goes back to what I was mentioning before, a lot of companies apply for one federal grant and very quickly despair. But the secret is in the consistency here. A little bit about us. Eagle Point Funding is an international consulting firm. We're the biggest of our kind, specializing in the non-dilutive funding space. Our company and the holding group that owns Eagle Point Funding, and another company, our sister company, Fremont Consultants, was established in 1999. We have 70 plus full-time employees, and we have currently over 250 plus active clients. Our successes are based on both a short-term and a long-term approach, which I've alluded to before. And to date, that's netted over $1.5 billion in awards for our clients. We have a success-oriented business model, and that's one of the ways that we guarantee that we're interested in our clients' successes. So without further ado, I want to introduce Uriel Bar-Oz. He's our chief analyst here at Eagle Point Funding. And he's going to take us through a more particular in-depth look at how the federal agencies look at unmanned technology.
Okay, so thank you, Josh, for that introduction, and hello to everyone who's attending. I'm Uriel Bar-Oz, Chief Analyst with Eagle Point Funding. I'll try to take you on a very short tour just to venture slightly deeper into the more technical aspects of what it is to submit for federal grants. So first of all, what you can see on the screen right now are a list of some of the most relevant federal agencies that are interested in R&D and innovative technology and are providing grants and support for such. You might not be surprised to see the DoD here, and it's already been mentioned several times in this presentation, but you can see additional agencies here. The NSF and Darpa and NASA are here. All of them are providing grants for R&D, and some of them you'd be surprised to hear that are also providing support for things that might not naturally come to mind, such as the Navy supporting air technology, or NASA supporting ground technology, and so on. So it's important to note this point, that at times the agencies will support things that are not naturally in their areas of interest, which is why it's important to delve deep into the BAAs that they publish, and hopefully you submit to them. The main point here is there's a universe of information out there, and you have to know where to start. And where does it all start? With your submission. So we'll go slightly deeper. Today we're discussing unmanned technologies. So we've gathered here the most important areas of research from the various agencies, as we found from years of working with them and in front of them. Please note that these are only the main areas of interest, so if you don't specifically find yourself on the list, be not alarmed. They are probably interested in your tech as well, as long as it's at least generally speaking, and their areas of focus. So what you can see now are platforms, unmanned platforms, such as energy conservation tools and technology, advanced charging solutions to increase the sustainability of these unmanned platforms. Also, advanced sensors and detections that may be mounted on these platforms. Mitigation, meaning how to defend against unmanned vehicles, such as locating as wide range as possible way of unmanned aerial vehicles, how to track them, find them, identify them, and then try to maybe do something against them, like such as take control of them, take them down. Also, advanced autonomous movement and AI, meaning advanced navigation, for instance, and surrounding awareness. Moving along, we have advanced mapping capabilities such as LiDAR, laser, advanced radar, real-time abilities, advanced maneuverability, such as maneuverability in the sense of advanced surfaces and power plants, advanced weight considerations, and the like. Also control, advanced control, obviously. And, well, in connection to sensors, for instance, or on its own, data collection and analysis. Now, it's important to note that all of these may come in the form of software, hardware, or even integrated solutions. So again, if you're in one field or the other, you can probably find yourself relevant for at least one BAA. They are very broad. So we'll take this even deeper to be a bit more specific. What you see on the screen right now is analysis done by us of a specific BAA, broad agency announcement. It's a sample grant, an actual one, real one. This specific one deals with three major topics. They are looking for tech used for detection, identification, and tracking of UASs. Second, tech for mitigation of such. And third, the improvement of sensor input of UASs. So this BAA specifically was even wider than that. It included topics that did not necessarily deal with UASs, but it did include these three. Now, what's important to note when considering applying for a BAA, and this is something that we obviously assist all our clients with, are three major things. You can see them just on the top there. First is technological relevance. You should make sure that you actually match your tech matches with what the BAA is looking for, and this is obviously always meant in the future tense. The grants are meant to support R&D, future R&D projects. So you have to make sure that what you wish to develop in the next, say, 12 to 36 months is actually matching with the BAA. Second, budget. How much are you willing to spend, and how much do you expect to receive from the specific BAA and the specific agency? At times, the agencies publish the numbers themselves. Most of the time, they don't. But you have to make sure that the support that is expected to be given matches with your needs. And lastly, deadlines. You have to make sure that you do have enough time and people and manpower to actually sit down and prepare the submissions. It does take some time, especially in the beginning, especially if you're not experienced with it. Again, we assist you with that, but it still takes time. So you have to make sure you have enough time, considering the deadlines for each BAA, in order to facilitate a successful submission and eventually receiving the grant. So moving along, we have a few more examples for you. What you see on the screen right now is one of two examples I will quickly go through from a specific SBIR program. This one from the DOT, Okay, Department of Transportation. They, like most, if not all, federal agencies have an SBIR program, which is the Small Business Innovation Research Support Program. In phase one, they always provide with about $150,000 of support. I say about, it's officially kind of capped there, but at times they do give more. And phase two is usually $500,000 to $1 million. Again, it's not a hard limit. Sometimes they go over it depending on your technological readiness level and your specific tech and more. What you see on the left side of this table are some of the main topics under this SBIR pertaining to UAV, UASs, and other autonomous and unmanned platforms. So machine vision systems and high resolution imaging, AI applications, and the like. So basically what you can see is there's a lot to be had even from a single SBIR program. This is only one page out of two. Continuing on this table, you can see even more relevant topics. So sensor data, like we mentioned before, drone-based track safety inspection systems. This is, again, this is for civilian use. This is the DOT. So not only the DOD is interested in drones or the like, other agencies are as well. Last topic here is virtual and augmented reality for assistance in all kinds of applications, such as use on unmanned platforms. So again, an example from SBIR program, and one last sample grant. This one from the Department of the Army. This one was from their Material Command, and the three major topics pertaining to unmanned platforms here. So again, autonomous robotics for both unmanned ground and aerial vehicles, software decision-making tools with all their different aspects. You can see C4ISR there. It stands for Command Control Communication Computers, Intelligence and Surveillance and reconnaissance. So that's a second point. And the third topic, again, sensing, perception, reasoning, all relevant for actual autonomous operation. So mapping, sensing, navigation, data collection and analysis, and more. Basically, what you can see is that as I started in my description, in my overview, almost all agencies are interested in unmanned platforms with their various applications. They are interested both in software and hardware solutions and tech. They always want to see something that's innovative, and lots of companies are getting into the field, so you really have to shine in order to actually secure the grant. But there are so many opportunities out there that you're bound to find at least some that are a good match for you. And if you submit enough of them and secure even one, then it's quite a hefty sum in most cases that can push a company forward quite easily. So I hope this made things a bit clearer. Again, all the information here was taken out of actual BAAs that are out there now, so it's all relevant and you know, from the field actually. So we have a short Q&A session here now that will be led by our Josh again. So take it away, Josh.
Okay, so first of all, I just want to say for all the attendees, I didn't mention it, but we have attendees from a very wide range of places, of course, of the continental U.S., but we also have people from abroad as well. So welcome everybody who's here. Now is an excellent time that if you do have any questions as it pertains towards federal grants, please add it in the question box, and at the end of our QA, we'll make sure we get time to answer a number of questions. So maybe I'll start off and just ask a couple questions. Oriel, you talked about a lot about what the federal agencies are not looking for. Can you talk about a little bit what they are in particular looking for when it comes to how they evaluate maybe a company or a proposal or an academic institution? What is it that the federal government's looking for?
Okay, thank you. That's a good question. We get asked that question quite a lot. What the federal agencies and actually the U.S. government is looking for are some things that we need to point out. First of all, the R&D has to be internal. It is okay to use outside help, such as contractors, but the R&D has to be internal. In other words, the actual knowledge and the IP has to be developed and researched by the company applying itself. Okay, so that's the first point. Second, they are looking for a long-term roadmap. As I mentioned before, this is always for future R&D and usually for medium to long term. So at least 12 months forward, in some cases even more than that. So you have to make sure that you do have a long-term R&D program. Next, they are looking for something new, something innovative, something that is revolutionary rather than evolutionary. They're not looking for necessarily for improvements on an existing tech. They are looking for a new tech. Now, they're not necessarily expecting you to reinvent the wheel, but they do want to see something new and exciting that can be used in various applications. In terms of manufacturing, commercialization, productization, and the like, they are not looking for that. They are supporting research and development. So if you've already completed your plans and your product is ready to go and you're just waiting to start selling, then these programs are not for you. These are for research and development only. There's somewhat of a gray area in between, which is integration. Sometimes that can be supported. It depends, meaning you do have lots of different parts that had to, sync together and work as a singular platform that does something innovative that might interest some federal governments, but you do have to be persuasive. So basically, you have to be quite innovative, and then you're probably set to go to receive a grant.
Okay, we have one question that was asked by the audience. David asks, how do you align TRL with the topic?
Okay, so in most cases, they are, as I said, looking for something innovative. So TRL does not have to be on the higher end of the spectrum. We're not looking for a 7, but it does have to be a list of 4 or 5. In most cases, they are not looking to support proof of concept type of submissions. They want something that's more than a concept, something that's been proven. They do support companies that have at least an MVP or a proof of concept and are looking to develop it into an actual platform that will get support. So basically, you could say they support the middle. They don't support only the research part. They won't support only the commercialization part. They support the mid-level TRL, say 4 to 6, I would say.
Well, yeah, we know of a number of cases, and we've worked with a number of companies that have had TRL far less than that, even people who came with concept. In fact, we have a story of one company that came to us, and their company was a suitcase, and they left at the end of the day with their team grew from 2 to 7 people, and they left with a 5-year grant of $65 million. So there's also an interest I know of early stage research, but yes, I would agree with you that as far as commercialization goes, there's far less. There is 1 or 2 organizations or agencies that help more on the commercialization side, but the main concern, the main focus of the federal agency is for early stage research. We had another question regarding ITAR, which for people who don't know about, ITAR deals with classified information. And that's a question that's more specific towards the type of research that I suppose that David's doing, and we're happy to discuss it more at length. We have another question here. What is the average size of a grant?
Well, that's again a popular question, kind of an easy one to answer. The average size of grant is about $1 million. Obviously, it varies, and we showed you some information before from the SBIR programs. On phase one, it's just $150,000, but phase two is already $500,000 to $1 million. So on average, BAAs, and that's just the SBIR program, which is usually slightly lower in support. The BAAs are usually higher in support. So again, on average, $1 million per grant.
Yeah, as we mentioned earlier on, the federal government is giving away somewhere between 60 and 70 billion dollars to private industry, more than that towards academic institutions. So it's also a question, and Oriel was talking about this a little earlier on, about what is your budget and how long are we talking? Do you have research that takes you for the next 6 months, or do you have research that takes you for the next 5 years? And obviously, the grants that you're going to be looking for 5 years worth of research for a team of, let's say, 40, 50 researchers is going to be a bigger grant than for a 6-month research project with 1 or 2 researchers on the team. So grants are a little bit of a chameleon. They adapt towards the needs of the company who's applying for them. Other than that, we have a couple more questions. They're all related more to price structure. I don't want to get into the nitty-gritty about how Eagle Point Funding works on a price model. I will happily say here that we are primarily success focused, but we also employ a per submission fee. So we're happy to discuss it at more at length on an individual case-by-case basis. So if there are no more questions, I think we'll kind of get to a summary here, which is, if you look at the topic of unmanned technology, you see that first and foremost, there's a lot of money out for unmanned tech in federal grants. A lot of it is by definition for unmanned technology, whether it's going to be by the different categories we discussed, or because the federal government is looking for a wide range of technologies and is looking to be surprised by what you're planning to do there, and how it's going to change the landscape for either unmanned tech or some robotic tech or sensor tech, all the categories which Oriel mentioned before. The topics of interest are diverse, and that's alluded to in the name of broad agency announcements. They're broad by definition. Grants are non-dilutive, which means that you're not sacrificing anything on the way of your control of your company, nor your revenue share of your company, nor your IP, or any other rights that you have towards your company. The grants are there in order to take high-risk research and make sure that it succeeds, in order so it can have its impact on the U.S. economy, as well as the lives of U.S. citizens and the world on a global scale as a whole. There's 2 main pitfalls. The reason why a lot of companies avoid federal grants, it's because it's difficult to identify opportunities, and there's a low per submission success rate. And that's where I think the Eagle Point Funding offers a key support. 1, we find a vast array of opportunities, and 2, we have a much higher per submission success rate, and we're engaged in a long-term strategy. The key to success: know the system, know your team and what you want to do, find as many opportunities as possible, and engage in a multi-submission strategy. Thank you, Oriel, for joining us. Thank you, all the attendees from different places of the globe where you came from. I'll leave up the screen here in case you would like to make a time to discuss how your company could potentially be eligible for federal grants, what type of grants could be available for your industry. One way to get in touch with me is by directly approaching my calendar. You can also send me an email, josh@eaglepointfunding.com. And in the meantime, have a great rest of your day. It was a pleasure hosting you here on Eagle Point Funding's Unmanned Projects for Federal Grants webinar. And stay tuned for upcoming webinars as they relate to transferring SBIR Phase 1 to Phase 2, and also federal grants for VC-backed companies. Thank you, and have a great rest of your day.